Hey everybody, it's Rob here. So I've been getting a lot of questions from the community asking about how exactly I will level with the Barbarian on the Diablo 4 launch. And in this video today, I want to share my strategies and exactly how I plan to reach the end game as fast as possible, basically. First of all, I will be leveling in a group, but most of the strategies I'm going to talk about here today also apply to your solo playthrough, because even in our group we already know that probably the chance is not that high that all of us can get in to all the servers and none of us is going to have any of the queues or anything. I think that's pretty unlikely that we will all be able to play together from basically minute or hour one. I certainly hope that's going to be the case, but I don't think it necessarily going to be, because there's going to be so many players. But yeah, we'll see. Everybody here is basically prepared to also level solo through the campaign. I will segment this video, or also the campaign and reaching endgame, into like 4 stages basically. I think that's a pretty good way to like sort of segment them. First is the very, very early level, like reaching key overshot and doing just the first quests. Second segment will be about the campaign, finishing the campaign. Third will be like reaching the mid game and transitioning into like your end game build. And 4 will basically be the end game character that you guys saw in many of the videos. And I will have a lot of videos linked in the description. So first of all, I have this video for the first stage, the very early leveling. This is from the server slam. I did this in 2-player on hardcore with my friend Rengar, who I will also be starting with. I was playing a Barb and he was playing a Sorceress. But we still both spec'd into like, basically being fine on our own. And you see, I'm starting out with the Upheaval Barbarian. And I also have all the planners here. I will go through them and they will also be in the video description. So I'm starting off with the Upheaval Barbarian, and you can see in the gameplay footage here, using Lunging Strike to move fast, to gain Fury, and basically Upheaval to kill all this like AoE monsters. Like if there's like a lot of monsters together, Upheaval is a really good skill to sort of like just like kill them all in one swing. And you cannot really do that with any of the other core skills effectively. After that, I will be transitioning into Rend. And I don't start with Rend, because it's just not good in these AoE scenarios, and this is what you need at the very start of the campaign. Later on, you are more focused on single target. So let's get into it. This is the first link that I have here. Again, all of them are going to be in the description. So this is what I used also in this video, from level 1 to like level 8, where we have to fight like the first like hard boss. And that's when the respec. So you start off, you Barbarian, you're level 1, and you're going into Lunging Strike first, because it gives you utility, and it also does a lot of damage with the second rune upgrade here. It basically inflicts 20% bleed plus does 30%. So this is like 50% weapon damage. It's as much as an entire Hoda cast, but it doesn't cost any Fury. On the contrary, it generates you Fury. So this is like insane, just comparing it just to Hoda, base rune at least. So this does the same damage as Hoda, but instead of spending, it generates you Fury, and it's great for utility. And it has this hidden multiplier, or not hidden, but multiplier from this rune, 1.3 multiplicative damage. So that's on top of the 50%, to healthy targets. And we will basically one-shotting everything on World Tier 1. Start on World Tier 1, that's really important as well. Barbarian is not the best class for leveling, so definitely want to be on World Tier 1. It's just more effective if you care about that. So Lunging Strike is just the best generator at the start, hands down. And then we will be going into Upheaval. We will use the Furious Upheaval. This one got nerfed from 80 to 30%, but it's still pretty good, because we just use a couple of Lunging Strikes to get our Fury and to get some stacks. Even if you only have like 3 or 4 stacks on average, it's still pretty good. And then you use your big Upheaval swing sort of to just kill the monsters. And then I will show you the transition phase. I found it to be the best. I did this like 5 times, and I found it to be the best to transition is right before we fight the first like sort of a bit harder boss. Like in this fight here, it's still beneficial to have the AoE damage in the, excuse me, the pronunciation, Vanhart fight. You're still good with the AoE, and I'll show you exactly why here. Like, you know, she spawns a lot of monsters, and the Upheaval here is stronger than Rend, because you see, if you do it properly, you can like kind of hit all of them at the same time. And you kind of can't do that with Rend. So you still want to be Upheaval on this boss. But then when it comes to the Herald of Lilith, this is the first, like, you know, like boss fight that takes a bit longer. Let me see if I can find the exact situation where I respec. And keep in mind, guys, the respec, it might not be the most attractive thing to do for players, but it is the most efficient thing, in my opinion, and from my testing. Obviously, like, this game is going to be min-maxed like crazy going forward by the community, so people might even find better ways, but at least for now, this is the most effective way that I found. So you notice here, I'm just like quickly respeccing from Upheaval into Rend. And you see, when I hover it, a refund cost is 0 gold. It doesn't cost you anything. It costs you like 5 seconds just to like respec the skills, and that's it. Like, there's no gold cost involved or anything, as long as you are below level 15. So that's why we do the respec here, just before the boss fight, because now we need single target, and Rend, if you see here, Rend deals 96 plus 12, so 108% total weapon damage, and has very good runes. Extend duration of vulnerability, and additional fury generation. It costs the same, or even less fury than Upheaval, but does way more damage, and it's just like a lot better than Upheaval in any like single target scenario. And that's exactly why we respec on versus these bosses. So whenever there's like an NPC line like that is just talking, you can easily respec, and that's exactly what I'm doing here. So I'm Rend now, and we're having a blast against this this boss. She's dying pretty quickly, at least for, you know, a Barbarian in the fight here. So we're smashing her basically, and the Rend is really helping. With Upheaval, I think this takes at least twice as long, so you can save a good 2 minutes already being on Rend here. And from here on out, I'm gonna keep playing the Rend buff. It might be, you know, beneficial to, like, if you want to min-max a lot, like you can juggle back and forward from Upheaval to Rend. Whenever you're in the open world, you Upheaval. Whenever you're fighting single target or bosses or dungeons, you're basically a Rend buff. It would be the most efficient thing to do, but it doesn't really change much because it's mainly just walking and doing the objectives, and Rend is really good in there. So I do this one respec and then I stick to Rend. That brings us to this second phase, the transition into Rend. So now I have all the points of Upheaval unspec'd. Again, all the planners in the description. And we're going full into Rend. And why Rend is also so fantastic is that the upgrade here extends the duration of vulnerability on the target. And if you extend the duration of vulnerability, you basically get a permanent damage buff if you can apply it. And to apply it, we will use a pretty nice combination. Here, Death Blow is one of the highest damage skills in the game. And this one basically allows you to get all the vulnerable up on the target with the exposed vulnerability. Whenever you deal direct damage with Weapon Mastery skill, which Death Blow is, and you have this for the boss, it's very nice DPS instantly, like double damage versus bosses. Also, I get some Fury to cast even more Rends. It applies vulnerable to the target for 3 seconds. So whenever I engage a boss, I start with Death Blow, and then I basically just Rend them down as long as my Fury allows, and then I Lunging Strike, and I Death Blow again, and keep Rending. And this will just extend the duration of the vulnerability on the target. The vulnerable damage is a separate multiplier. So the minimum is a 1.2 multiplier that you get, just the base. But usually you have some stuff on the 4 weapons that you use on the bar. Look out for vulnerable damage, it's really strong. And this also helps your teammates. Like, the target is vulnerable, and you know, like your teammates can also benefit from that. But this works in solo, just like I said, just as well. And yeah, this is basically the Rend build. Like, we focus on the Rallying Cry, it helps us with our Fury. Warcry for our group, for our team members. If you're playing solo, you want to play the Fortify rune. If not, you can spec into Power Warcry for some multiplicative damage for all the party. You go for Booming Voice, more duration on all the shouts, more uptime. Well, and then we have the Death Blow. Here we have the Fortify, so we can take the Fortify damage multipliers. 1 point in Hamstring, like I always recommend. And then Cut to the Bone is a really, really strong passive. Bleed effects, well, Rend is a bleed. Deals 1.18 multiplicative damage to vulnerable enemies. And yeah, with this, and this Rend rune. We always have vulnerable, and our main damage source is bleeding. As the ultimate, we use Call of the Ancients. It's just really, really strong. I unfortunately can't show you the story footage yet, because that's still under NDA. But what I can show you is basically what I did after I reached 50. So this is just before the third transitional phase, when we transition into the mid-game. So this is basically the build I had when I came out of the story mode. You can see here I was just like checking out the Helltide for the first time, and I was still like blasting pretty good with this build. You see, it's one-shotting everything, even on this World Tier 3 that I transitioned into. But the AoE is not the best. So this is a very strong build for the campaign. But here, I'm basically right now, I should be transitioning into the Whirlwind build. And I will do this. I was just missing like one of the aspects. And I farmed it here, and then I could transition fully into the Whirlwind. But yeah, this is basically the gameplay. Like you get a lot of fury from your Ancients, you rend up everything, you bleed it to death. This is how you're gonna do your campaign. At least that's what I found to be, you know, the most effective thing to do. And after you're done with the campaign with this Rend bleed build, you're gonna transition into stage 3, which is mid-game. You're done with the campaign, you're now in tier 3, and now you want to focus a bit more on AoE damage, because now you're gonna like farm in the open world, you're gonna farm dungeons. Your main objective is not to kill the bosses and the campaign quests anymore. So here we transition into the early version of the Whirlwind bleed build. One thing I forgot here is actually there is a couple aspects that you can pick up in the story that help you a lot for the Rend stuff. Fortify Generation 1 Maximum Fury, Edgemaster, and the Shouts one. This is the most important one. But the rest is pretty okay to beat the story with. And when you transition into the Whirlwind, ideally you want to have the Dire Whirlwind. This is also, you can see here, Garlan Hold in Skosglen. So you can get this one from the Codex too, and then you can transition into this build in mid-game. And we can go over the skill tree real quick. So we take Furious Whirlwind for the bleed, Pressure Point to apply vulnerability, Warcry again. We can take the Iron Skin, at least early on, because it gives you the barrier, and the barrier allows you to get a few more damage multipliers if you have them from Conceded. It's not required, but it definitely helps a lot. But you can also, like, if you like playing with Leap or like, you know, any other skill here, you can take those as well. But yeah, triple shouts, we're starting with that. Shout synergies here, 1 point in hamstring, like always. Fortify mechanics, because we get Fortify from our Numbing Wrath. And yeah, then we already, instead of Call of the Ancients, we're now going into Wrath of the Berserker and Unbridled Rage. And that's basically the transitional build. This one allows you to deal crazy amounts of bleeding damage, and you have good AoE damage, and suddenly slowly your Fury demand gets a bit better, because you get more and more sources of Fury generation and Fury buffs. And with that, you can basically be spinning pretty constantly already. Maybe not permanently, but like pretty constantly. Let's get into the early Paragon boards now for this mid-game. This is again level 55 to 75, like just after you're done with the campaign, basically. You transition. You can even transition like with level 50. It really depends a bit on what aspects you have and if you have the Whirlwind aspects or not. So we are already setting this up for the endgame build. So we need to respec as little as possible in the Paragon boards, because those are pretty expensive. I think on the Paragon board 100, it costs you like 50 points to respec, and there's like over 220 points, right? So you definitely want to be planning this out ahead of time. And this is the Paragon board. It's only like 100 points into it, and then it transitions into the last planner I have here. Again, everything is in the description. So what's really important is these glyphs. They start dropping when you, I think when you reach level 50, and they are not super common, but you will find them all. You can compare them a bit with the legendary gems in D3. You know, you might not get your Bane of the Trapped, you know, in the first Great Rift run, but it's gonna come, and they can drop anywhere in the open world, pretty much. So if you find the first useful glyph, like you can swap these around a bit as well. I'm using Wrath Marshal for the shouts and Exploit for the vulnerable. But again, you can also use like Territorial here for the start. Like, it doesn't really matter all too much. It's a bit RNG. Obviously, the best choice is Exploit, but if you find another glyph, it's also fine to put it in here. And you notice here, the early glyphs, they don't have the +4 range bonus yet. So you have to deal with basically just 3 range. And you should adjust your Paragon tree accordingly. So you see this glyph here, Exploit, it scales with Dex. But as it only has 3 range in this board, I don't skill this Dex yet. Later on, when I leveled it to, I think it's level 15 when they get +4, you want to put this point. So in the endgame guide, you see we have this point. But for now, we don't need it, so we can just skip it, basically, right? Exploit, like we pick this one up, it's just 2 nodes because we need the Dex nodes, and we keep going up. The board's physical damage is going to help us a lot. And next board here is pretty important because it has a very strong rare node. We have Weapons Master is just the board. And the rare node here that I'm talking about is Hunter Killer. It gives additional elite damage, and this is a lot. It gives you 32 elite damage plus 8.5 plus 8.5 plus 8.5 and 14% movement speed after killing an elite, plus another 14% movement speed. So it's like 28 movement speed and like 40 elite damage. It's insane to pick up. And this glyph is very important for your shout cooldown. We want to have the triple shout. And notice here we also only have 3 range, not 4 yet, because it's not leveled. It's not realistic to have it leveled when you're like level 60 or 70. You're not gonna have it level 15. It's gonna take a bit longer. So you have to have 40 strength in range. And here's a special case, because once we get the +4 on level 15, the +4 rank, we will get 10 plus 10, so 20 strength just from the rare nodes alone. But we don't have that yet, so we must take additional strength nodes here in range. So you see here, I need the 40 main stat here, so I have 10, 20, 30, and 40. Later on, you notice here as well, we can get rid of most of the points and still get the bonus because we have 10, 20, 30, and 40. And this is just how how the Paragon boards might differ a lot, but depending on at what stage of glyph progression you are. But you can already like plan this out and only have to respec as minimum as possible. So you see here, there's only like 4 nodes we can take out later. And it doesn't really like cost a lot of gold to do that, especially on a lower level. So from there, we go into one of the most important boards. It's the Warbringer. We take it second because I feel the Hunter Killer has just even more value to it to have that early on. And on the second board, we get our additional Fortify mechanic. Especially when we transition into endgame, we definitely want that because we need to drop this helm eventually for either Shaco, or we need to drop our gloves and put the Whirlwind pulse on the helm and equip the very strong Gore bracers that makes our Whirlwind explode after it ends. More on that in the endgame build. So that's kind of why that's kind of why we take Warbringer, even though it's very powerful. We take it as our second board here. And yeah, we have the Raft glyph in here because this is a GG Dex board. And again, we have 25 Dex requirements, so we must skill a bit more. There's not really a point putting in these Dex nodes here. We will do that in the endgame build because then we have +4 range and we can get the benefit from these Dex nodes for a total of 49 dexterity. But for now, we're good with this 25. And, well, we continue to spec very efficiently. We want to go into Warbringer. And these nodes here are pretty important. They give us Fury on kill, which is then again amplified by our Rallying Cry and our other Fury source Fury generation sources. So this one gives us 1, 2, and another 2. So 4 Fury per kill times our Rallying Cry. So here we're getting 1.56 multiplier plus another 1.2. So we are basically like getting like 7 Fury on every monster that we kill. And we're gonna kill a lot of monsters. This is a Whirlwind build. We're gonna like, you know, spin to win through the monsters very quickly and kill many of them power. And then we go all the way into Warbringer. And then we So excuse me. Then we go all the way into Warbringer. The boards are the same here. And then we go into our next board. And the next board, like, we're gonna transition right into the end game. And this is like the video of me that you've seen clearing the 100. I didn't have even all the items. I didn't have the Grandfather yet, which is a double multiplier on our crit damage. And I didn't have the Shaco yet, which gives us, which is just an insane helm. And I don't really know if it really works like that, but if we get another +4 ranks to our skills with our challenging shout, we might be immortal. So I don't know, in my level 100 clear, I had 84% damage reduction, and I didn't have a Shaco. I didn't have a helm that had damage reduction. And this one gives us +4 skills. And challenging shout, you know, gives us 4% additive damage reduction per rank. So 4 times 4 is 16, and again, like I said, we already have 84, so we are reaching 100% damage reduction. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I've not been able to find the Shaco. I'm going to be very interested to find out. But obviously the Barb shouldn't be immortal, so maybe that's something to look into for the devs at some point. But we'll see. I mean, maybe I'm wrong and something works differently, or it scales multiplicatively at some point, or something. I don't know. Again, I didn't have these items, but this is basically the full endgame build here. Fully skilled. You can see the skills and everything. All the planners and all the paragons. I mean, I already went over the first 3 boards. Like, we need to switch around like a couple of nodes again, because we have a level 15, ideally. So +4 range on all these glyphs, so it saves us a couple points. We go into, this is also a really important one. This is Decimator. It gives us all this vulnerable damage, which is a separate multiplier to all of our damage again. And, you know, with all of our barrier, all of our shields and stuff, we hope to have permanently full life. So we can comfortably use this Imbera to get crazy amount of damage while we're healthy. Pick up the vulnerable node. And then we have the Bonebreaker. Here it's just a very short, very sweet board to go into. 49 decks in range here for the exploit, which is probably the best gem for the Barb, the best glyph that the Barb has. And then you see here, once all the renown is maxed, here I even have points remaining now. I'm not sure what they did here. I think it's probably from the altars of Lilith. So yeah, you can pick even some more nodes here if you like. Yesterday I just said 0, by the way. See, I have 220 points remaining. I think they just updated this. But basically, where you want to put these 2 points, we can do this right now. I think we have about 4 physical damage nodes. So physical damage is pretty good, but it does not scale with our explosion. So there might be even some room to min-max this even further, but the physical damage still calculates for the original Whirlwind damage that we do, and then we apply 70% of that. But that then scales with fire damage and not double dips with our physical. So physical damage is still okay, but it's not the best stat necessarily. See, then we have 2 more physical nodes here. And then this 1 Paragon point, I don't even know where it's coming from, because I think there's only 4 altars with +1, so I'm just gonna like leave that open. But yeah, you can find some nice, like, you know, 50 armor magic node to put it into. But that's basically the full Paragon tree here. And the explanation. So just to summarize real quick. Level 1 to 8, we're starting with Lunging Strike and Upheaval. Then when we fight the Herald of Lilith here, we transition into Rend, Barbarian. Rend and Deathblow were vulnerable. Best single target you can probably do on a Barb early on. And I cruised through the campaign with this spec. Like, I think I beat the campaign in about 7 hours. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I was T3 in 7 hours. I just like killed the final boss. And then we have the transition in mid-game to like the early version of the Whirlwind Barb here. Early Paragon tree, +3 range. And then once we are like, you know, once you find like your uniques, once you have your gore online and maybe some more items, we transition into the endgame full Whirlwind Giga Chat build here that you've seen clearing 100, even without these like 2 insane items. So you don't even need these uniques. I mean, this unique, the gore, is pretty important, but The build works without it, and it definitely works without Shaco and the Grandfather. But you can sure min-max it. If you have all these items, I think you're gonna like crush all the hardest like endgame content already. But yeah, that remains to be seen. I hope you enjoyed this little overview and this video. If you like what you see, if it helps you, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe for more content. I have a lot more stuff coming here over the next days, and I'll be streaming a lot as well. And I will see you around. Rob, over and out. Take care.